Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on the Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers scheme. We're just going to give it another 2 or 3 minutes for a few more attendees to join. We had a good number register, so we just give it a chance for the other attendees to come on to the session here tonight. Thank you. We might kick off now. The number here in attendance seems to be remaining reasonably steady, so I think we'll commence. Just want to welcome you all again. Thanks very much for joining us this evening for our information session on the Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers scheme, or CISYF as we call it. So the format of tonight's session will be 2 presentations. So my colleague Eddie Ford from the Entitlements and Financial Controls Division will give an overview of the terms and conditions of the scheme, and that will be followed by a presentation from Raymond Burke in relation to inspections related to the scheme and the process for those inspections. If at any time during the session you have any questions for either of the presenters, please type them into the questions box on the side of the screen there. We will pick those up, and after the second presentation has ended, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll try and address as many of those questions as we can. So we might just kick off then with the first presentation. I'll hand you over to Eddie to give that overview on the terms and conditions of the scheme. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I'm just going to see if I can get the slideshow running now. Okay. I hope you can see the presentation, the slideshow there. Okay, so Eddie Ford is my name. I work in the Cap Entitlements Division of the Department of Agriculture. It's the area that looks after the generational renewal supports within the agriculture sector, including the complementary income support for young farmers. These are the measures that are on pillar 1 of the CAP in terms of supporting generational renewal. So in terms of the complementary income support for young farmers, I'm just going to give you an overview of the scheme, some of the eligibility criteria and some other information on it. So starting at the basic level, what is the complementary income support for young farmers? Well, it's the successor scheme to the Young Farmer scheme that many of you may have been familiar with, that operated under the previous CAP from 2015 to 2022. The new scheme provides an additional payment to eligible young farmers based on the number of eligible hectares rather than entitlements, as was the case under the Young Farmer Scheme. There's a maximum of 50 hectares that's payable per eligible applicant, and it's paid for a maximum term of 5 years. So commenced in 2023, it's scheduled to run until 2027. If somebody comes into the scheme, let's say in 2025, they have a guarantee of 25, 26 and 27, but member states are not allowed to give any comfort to people beyond that. So the current cap is scheduled to run until 2027, so we can't give any commitments beyond that. You must also be eligible to receive payment under BIS, so you must hold one BIS payment entitlement or part of a payment entitlement in order to draw down payment under the CISYF. So in terms of the background, there's a fund of 35.58 million each year from 23 to 27. As I mentioned, it's based on eligible hectares subject to a maximum of 50. You must be entitled to payment under BIS and hold the one payment entitlement or part thereof. And in terms of an indicator of how successful the scheme has been, the level of interest that there has been in the scheme in its first year of operation in 2023, we received 6,750 applications. And when you compare that to the final year of the Young Farmer Scheme in 2022, where we had 5,700, it's showing an 18.5% increase. And significantly within that 6,750, there were 2,200 first-time applicants in 2023. We had just 1,200 first-time applicants in 2022. So an increase, huge increase of 85% in the number of people who were first-time applicants in the Young Farmer Support Scheme under Pillar 1 in 2023. In terms of the eligibility, these are the basic eligibility requirements. So you must be under 40 at the time of your first application. So don't have your 41st birthday in that calendar year. You must have set up for the first time during the 5 years preceding your first application. And by set up, we generally mean that it would be when you had a herd number for the first time in your own name, or where you were maybe added to a herd number during the 5 years preceding your first application. You must have completed the Level 6 Agricultural Education course by the scheme closing date. So that's you either have the cert in hand or you have all aspects of the course fully completed. That would be exams, practicals, all coursework completed by the closing date for the scheme, which in 2024 is the 15th of May. And then you have to submit a valid BIS application under a herd number on which you are named, the young farmer will be named, and you hold one payment entitlement or part of a payment entitlement, so you can draw down BIS. The key element of the CISYF, as was also the case with the Young Farmer Scheme, is the demonstration of financial and managerial control of the young farmer. You know, the funds are in place to support young farmers starting out to offset the costs, particularly in the early years immediately after the establishment of the holding. And it is key that the young farmer is the person who's in control. So the financial and managerial control aspect is very important. And in terms of within a group, such as a joint herd number, a registered farm partnership, or a company, the young farmer has to demonstrate that control. So at least one person in that group has to meet the definition of young farmer in terms of the age, the education, the commencement, and so on. And also within a group, the young farmer has to demonstrate that long-term control solely or jointly within the group. That's demonstrated by the young farmer's name being on the herd number. The young farmer's name is on the bank account that's used to receive the BIS and the CISYF payments. And in the case of a company, the young farmer must be a director of the company and also a minimum of 20% shareholder within that company. And then finally, the young farmer must also complete a declaration form. The declaration form confirms that the young farmer has effective control within the group. It is signed by all members of the group. So if you have 3 people in a registered farm partnership, each of the 3 signs the declaration, and their signatures then have to be witnessed and stamped by a solicitor. That documentation is uploaded at application stage. And then for the CISYF, in terms of the demonstration of financial managerial control and application stage, the expectation is that the young farmer's name will be on the invoices and on the bank account that's used for all the transactions or the business of the holding. So at online application stage, we would ask for a sample of those documents to be uploaded in support of the application. So the young farmer's name, we would like to see on a farm business related transaction within the holding. So the relevant invoice for that day-to-day farming activity, and the extract from the bank account that's used for the day-to-day farm business transactions of the holding, that we can track that transaction through the bank account as well. I would also then look at the corresponding receipt for that transaction. Within a partnership, and partnerships are becoming more common. I think we have somewhere in the excess of 4,000 partnerships now operating in the department in terms of submission of applications for direct payment support. So within a partnership, the young farmer has to be named on a herd number within the partnership, and the herd number on which the young farmer is named must declare eligible land. The land just can't be declared under the other partner herd numbers in order to be eligible. So the young farmer, the herd number that they are named on, must declare eligible land. And also, in order to be eligible to draw down this payment, which is one of the criteria for eligibility, the herd number on which the young farmer is named within the partnership must also be entitled to payment under this. So that herd number must hold one payment entitlement or part of a payment entitlement. So land and payment entitlement on the herd number that the young farmer is named on is key in terms of an application under a registered farm partnership. There is inspection requirements under the CISYF as there were under the young farmer scheme, and Ray will go into some more detail in terms of the inspection requirements and so on in the next presentation. But in summary terms, at least 5% of applications are selected each year for inspection. In 2023, that was 10%. So the young farmer is interviewed as part of that process, and they're required to demonstrate knowledge of the day-to-day operations of the holding. There's a greater scrutiny of the supporting documents in terms of the business transactions showing the young farmer's name on it, so invoices, receipts, bank account, and so on. So there's a more in-depth look at the day-to-day transactions within the farm as part of the inspection. And from 2023, where the applicant fails an inspection, not only is a point where there is no payment is made, there's now a penalty applying, and that penalty is equivalent to the amount that the applicant would have received if eligible. So if somebody, if they were successful, would have received, a payment in the region of €5,000, if they fail at inspection stage, not only do they not get paid that €5,000, but a penalty of €5,000 is applied. There was serious concern with the level of failure at young farmer scheme inspection levels. So this measure was introduced under the CISYF from 2023 to try and reduce the level of ineligibility that has been found at inspection stage. So if you're selected for inspection or you receive notification of an inspection, you're not allowed to withdraw from the scheme, or if you've been otherwise notified of an irregularity by the department. And it's good to note that failure of inspection, it does increase the risk of selection for further inspection in the subsequent year. It's one of the risk criteria that is used to select the inspection cases in the subsequent year, are those who fail in the current year. So some points that are relevant to the CISYF applicants, it's online applications only. There is a facility for people who may not have a herd number. So if you've made an application to your district or regional veterinary office for a herd number and it's not available to you at the time that online applications are open, you can use a temporary reference number facility to submit your application. And then as soon as the herd number is made available to you, you can contact the department and we will link the temporary reference number application with the herd number and then becomes a valid application for processing. So all correspondence from the department to applicants is online via INET. The agent associated with the application, and again, the number of applications coming into the department, I think somewhere around 80% of applications for direct payments are submitted on behalf of an applicant by an agricultural agent. So the agent will receive an email to advise that that correspondence is available. This was a facility we had up to 2022, wasn't made available to us for the 23 scheme year, but it is to be returned to us for the 2024 scheme year. And then as the agent gets the email to advise the correspondence, the applicant gets a text message to advise that the correspondence is available. The application process itself, so all applications have to be submitted online via agfood.ie. And for the CISYF, for new applicants, you have to submit the application online via the National Reserve Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers facility on agfood.ie. If you've been successful in a previous year, so for example, an applicant who was successful in 2023 and who is eligible to apply for continued participation in the scheme in 24, there will be a slider button option available on the 2024 BIS online application. So you must ensure that you actually select that option, use the slider button, and a thumbs up icon will indicate that the application has been submitted. In the event that that option is not available on the BIS application for 2024, the onus is on the applicant to submit a new application via the online application facility for NRCISYF. And if there's been a change of registration to the herd number since your application last year, that slider button won't be available to you. So in situations like that, you must apply online via the NRCISYF application facility on agfood.ie. Just before we finish up and have some contact details for you on the next slide, but some of you may be aware that the EU at the moment are organising a consultation on the simplification process. There's much talk, and you'll have seen many protests in terms of the administrative burden on farmers across Europe. And in response to this, the Commission are running this consultation on the simplification process. So if you want to take part in this survey, you'll see at the bottom of the slide there, you want to take note of it, that's the address that you can log on to, EU survey-survey and europa.eu. That will give you the link to that consultation process, so that you can make your views known and make your own submissions to the EU on the simplification process. And then those are the contact details for anybody who has any questions on the operation of the CISYF. There's a dedicated email address there that is constantly monitored. It's National Reserve YFS at agriculture.gov.ie. And there's a low call number there as well. So if you ring that number, your call, it'll either be dealt with straight away or you'll be referred to the section where somebody will call you back and will answer any queries that you may have on the schemes. So that is the conclusion of my presentation, and we'll be handing over to Ray now for his presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks, Eddie. So I presume you can all hear me there. As I say, my name is Raymond Burke, and I work in the Integrated Controls Division with the Department of Agriculture in Portlaoise. We have responsibility for the inspections part of the CIS YF scheme. So I'm going to go through some of the inspection process and key requirements. So presentation overview. So I'll cover the scheme eligibility requirements, the CIS-YF inspection process, managerial and financial control requirements, some common non-compliances found at inspection, the post-inspection process, and the CIS-YF inspection preparation, things young farmers should look out for ahead of preparing for an inspection. So the scheme eligibility requirements. Now Eddie has gone through this in his the previous presentation, but just to refresh. So to qualify for the complementary income support for young farmers, the applicant must have submitted a valid 2024 BIS application. The closing date is the 15th May 2024. Be aged no more than 40 years of age at any time during the calendar year in which she or he first submits an application under the complementary income support for young farmers. Has successfully completed a recognised course of education in agriculture, giving rise to an award at a FETAC level 6 or its equivalent by the 15th of May 2024, and be setting up as head of an agricultural holding for the first time, or has set up such a holding during the 5 years preceding the first submission of an application under the complementary income support for young farmers. So the CIS-YF inspection process, the inspections are conducted in two parts. So part one is land eligibility inspection requirements, is described in the terms and conditions for the basic income and support for sustainability, which is available on the department website. Part two then examines the compliance with complementary income support for young farmers 2024 requirements. Again, is described in the terms and conditions for the complementary income support for young farmer scheme, which is also now available on the department website. So for part one is the land eligibility inspection. So this is carried out by aerial photography or satellite imagery, and may also be a ground inspection. You've heard a lot of talk about the area monitoring system. So this is where this comes into play, where there's constant monitoring of the land to check to see is there agricultural activity going on, and checking also for the crop type on the ground. So the eligible hectare is the basis of payment for all area-based payments, for example, for your BIS, your ANC, or for your CIS YF scheme, or etc. So the eligible hectare is an agricultural area that is used for an agricultural activity, and the agricultural activity must be carried out by the person claiming the land. So all these checks on the land will be done during the 2024 year. CIS-YF inspection process part two then, so examines compliance with the complementary income support for young farmers for 2024 requirements. Again, this is described in the terms and conditions, which is available on the department website. So we're establishing that the CIS-YF young farmer is in managerial control and also in financial control of the holding. So in terms of managerial control, this is established by the interview carried out with the CIS-YF applicant. Examines that the CIS-YF has knowledge of the farming operations, has a full understanding of the day-to-day knowledge of what's going on the farm, and the interview was carried out solely with the CIS-YF applicant. For financial control then, It's a check if the financial operations are conducted through a bank account under the control of the CIS-YF applicant, either solely or jointly, if the CIS-YF is part of a group. Invoices, receipts, and bank accounts used for all transactions must contain the CIS-YF's name. Again, so part 2 of the inspection is announced up to 48 hours notice. The CIS-YF is advised of procedures or of the process of the inspection will take at announcement. So an outline of the interview and the kind of documentation that will be required at inspection. As Eddie mentioned, the inspection rate is normally 5% as per EU regulation, but this has since increased to 10% since 2020 as per EU regulation and due to the continued high failure rate for the scheme. Managerial control check. So established in an interview with the CIS-YF applicant. The check is on knowledge of all farming enterprises on the farm and interview based on a standard list of questions. So the questions, they all relate to the scheme year 2024. They explore knowledge of the day-to-day farming operations. They are on documented facts so that validation is possible. So there are generally 5 to 6 questions per enterprise and depending on the enterprises operated on the holding. So the key message is that the young farmer must demonstrate knowledge for all farming enterprises. For the financial control check, so this is a document check to establish that the CIS-YF is in financial control, examination of receipts and invoices for farm enterprises. So a specific sample of transactions are checked for each enterprise. Example, for dairying, your milk sales for a number of months will be checked, and also maybe for cattle sales, a number of cattle sales transactions will be checked, sales or purchases, and documentary evidence of sales or purchase value, including inputs, will be required. The bank account statements are for a bank account or accounts under control of the CIS-YF applicant will also be required at inspection. So either solely or jointly, showing transactions for the sales or purchases that are checked at inspection. So any transactions, any sales or purchase transactions checked at inspection, these transactions will also should go through a bank account under the control of the CIS-YF applicant. For milk or grain, a contra account is acceptable with your merchant or your co-op, but must contain the name of the CIS-YF applicant. So again, the key message here is that the YF must demonstrate full financial control for all farming enterprises. The documentation checks. So checks on transactions for the 2024 scheme year only. This includes a check to see that the department payments, including your BIS, CRIS, ECO scheme or any forestry payments, are going through a bank account under the control of the CIS-YF applicant, also in the name of the CIS-YF applicant. Check documents are photocopied or photographed at inspection by the inspecting officer. If documentation is not available on day of inspection, the inspector will issue a document request letter. This document request letter will list the documents to be provided by the applicant, and it allows 14 days for the applicant to forward these documents back to the inspecting officer. And if the required documents are not received, the CIS-YF will be deemed ineligible for payment. Check documents are retained on file by the department. So some common non-compliances found at inspection: failure to demonstrate managerial control. So the applicant has insufficient knowledge of the farming operations or the day-to-day running of the farm. It's not familiar with crops or with the number of animals or stock on the farm, or if the applicant does not show up for the interview. Failure to demonstrate financial control is where the department cannot trace financial transactions through a bank account under the control of the young farmer. So a different account is used, where transactions are being lodged into a bank account not under the control of the CISYF applicant, or a bank account where the CISYF applicant is not named. For sole operators, the bank account is under control of the CISYF applicant plus another farmer. So if the bank account is under control of the young farmer plus another applicant that is also farming in their own right with their own herd number, this is not allowed. Partnership then, so partnership situations where a bank account under the control of the CISYF plus a partner plus another farmer not involved in the partnership, again, this is not allowed at inspection. And also we find that from time to time that where the document request letter goes out to the CISYF applicant requesting further documentation, applicants are not sending in the documentation, or failure to send in the documentation either within the time frame or not at all. So if this is not sent in the correct time frame, the applicant will be deemed ineligible. So moving along then to the post-inspection process. So if the CISYF applicant is deemed eligible, they're cleared for payment and they will receive the top-up payment. If the CISYF is deemed ineligible, the control report letter is issued. So the control report letter provides the reasons for ineligibility for payment. So this may be, for example, failure to demonstrate managerial control or failure to demonstrate financial control. Failure to provide the requested documentation, as I explained, or maybe does not show up for the interview. So the applicant provided with 14 days to respond to the control report letter. So if the applicant responds to the control report, so there's different options here. So if the CISYF applicant does not respond to the control report, or if they respond to the control report and accept the details that were issued on the control report, the applicant will then be issued with a formal notice letter, an FN letter issued, which will deem the applicant ineligible. Any new documentation or information submitted is considered, leading to the CISYF applicant being deemed eligible for payment or cleared for payment. So if the applicant responds to the control report and sends in documentation that the district superintendent will review, and if they accept this documentation, the applicant will be issued a clear FN letter and deemed and cleared for payment. Or if the district superintendent looks at this documentation sent in and does not accept the documentation sent in, the CISYF applicant will be deemed ineligible for payment, and then the formal notice letter is issued. The formal notice letter then sets out reasons for being deemed ineligible, and it provides the applicant with 28 days, the option of 28 days to seek a review by a district inspector. So some important points here that the CISYF applicant in terms of preparing for an inspection. So for managerial control, be familiar with all enterprises on the farm and all the day-to-day runnings on the farm. In terms of financial control, ensure that farm business financial transactions are through a bank account under the control of the CISYF applicant. For a sole operator, the bank account must be under the control of the CISYF applicant. Financial transactions for CISYF in a group. So in a situation of a company, all transactions must go through the company bank account. For a partnership situation, all through the partnership bank account. For joint ventures, all through a bank account under control of the CISYF solely or jointly. All cases, other names on the bank account cannot be a separate farmer. And a CISYF as a signatory on a bank account is not acceptable. CISYF compliance. So compliance with the scheme requirements is outlined in section 1.6 of the Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers Terms and Conditions. Managerial control, so sole operators and CISYF in a group, so involved in the day-to-day farming operations and the knowledge for all enterprises on the holding. Financial control, sole operators and CISYF in a group, transactions to a bank account under the CISYF control for both sales and purchases, and all department payments, including forestry payments, must go through a bank account under the control of the CISYF applicant. So thank you for your attention, and any queries can be sent to the email below here, yfosinspections@agriculture.gov.ie, or Eddie also gave another email address there for queries can be sent to the National Reserve yfs@agriculture.gov.ie. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Raymond, and thanks, Eddie, for your presentation also. So we have a few questions in the chat box here. I'm just going to go through these one by one and I'll direct them. First one for you, Eddie. What is the definition of young farmer?
Okay, the definition of young farmer, member states had to define what a young farmer was, but in terms of the age, the regulations for the new CAP allowed member states to choose that a young farmer could be between the age of 35 and 40, an upper age of 35 and 40. So Ireland opted to go with the upper age of 40. The reason being that the young farmer scheme and how a young farmer had been defined in the CAP that ran from 2015 to 2022, that had an upper age limit of 40. So it made sense for Ireland to maintain consistency in terms of the young farmer supports from moving from one CAP into the next, particularly where people who were in the young farmer scheme were allowed to roll over automatically into the CISYF. It would have made no sense to go for an age limit that was below 40, because we would have ruled out an entire cohort of people. So that's the justification for the age part. And then in terms of the commencement date, say having commenced within the previous 5 years, again there was consistency there with the approach that had been taken in the previous CAP. The education requirement, again, consistency with the previous CAP. So somebody had remarked that consistency is the most is the simplest form of simplification. And in terms of keeping the definition of the young farmer consistent between the previous CAP and the new CAP, that's where we come up with the definition of young farmer. I know on a domestic level, I think it's an age of 35 that's used for a young farmer in terms of a lot of the agri-taxation measures, but those are done at national level. The fact that the regulations underpinning generational renewal supports from 2015 to 2020 had gone with 40, we maintain the 40 for the current CAP, as I said.
Thanks very much, Eddie. Next one here, I think, is also for yourself. So the attendee has said, our money was reduced last year, I believe, due to more people applying to the scheme than was envisaged. If there's a similar number of new applicants this year, has the budget been increased for the scheme this year?
Okay. Well, I suppose the rather than actually being reduced, if you look at it, the rate payable in 2023 was more than double the rate had been payable up to 2022. So there was a significant increase. For the CAP strategic plan, member states had to identify what the indicative rates would be, or estimates of rates that they could put into the CSP. This was done obviously before applications had come in. It was done a year or 18 months beforehand. So in Ireland's case, there was an estimate of what the payment rate would be. It was based on the number of successful applicants in previous years, and taking account of increased interest in the scheme for each year, those rates were actually reducing from 2023 to 2027. There's a fund of 35.58 million available. And if you look at that, 35.58 million will be paid out for 2023. That compares very favourably to the just over 12 million that was paid out under the Young Farmer Scheme in 2022. So it's a very significant increase in terms of the rates of payment under the new scheme.
Thanks very much, Eddie. You're up again for the next one. Does the maximum 50 hectares apply to the land in the Young Farmer's name, or all land under the BIS for the partnership?
Okay, well, look, there's a couple of types of partnership. So if you have a single herd partnership, all the land is declared under that single partnership number, and that's held in joint names. If it was a two-person partnership on a single herd, similar to a joint herd number, the max of 50 applies in that case. But if you took a multi herd number partnership, so if you take a registered farm partnership, for example, that has two herd numbers, one herd number is in the name of the young farmer, and the other herd number is in the name of a non-young farmer, and they come together to form a partnership. If the young farmer, for example, has 20 hectares and the non-young farmer has 40 hectares, so they have a combined total of 60 for the partnership. So when the allocations have been made, it'll first look at the herd number that the young farmer is on. So in this case, the young farmer will have 20 eligible hectares and will receive CISYF payment on those 20 hectares. But the balance of 30 is then moved across and is given to the non-young farmer. So the young farmer has made the partnership eligible for the total of 50. And the way that those hectares are held then between the two partners, you have the 20 held by the young farmer, and the balance of 30 then can be drawn down based on the eligible land area declared by the non-young farmer. So the net result is that the partnership benefits to the tune of the max of 50, because the young farmer has made the partnership eligible. But as I mentioned in one of the slides, that young farmer does in fact have to declare eligible land and does have to hold at least one payment entitlement in order to make the partnership itself eligible.
Thanks a million, Eddie. Next question: what is the situation with land now leased into the system? Will this qualify for the young farmer payment even if there are no entitlements on this land? The farm already has entitlements on owned land.
Okay, well, in that situation, it sounds like there's owned land and entitlements. So, that would mean there is eligibility for BIS payment. If there is extra land that has been leased in, and it's eligible land, for example, if they owned 20 hectares and 20 entitlements, for example, and leased in an extra 30 hectares, even if there's no entitlements attached to that, they can draw down CISYF payment based on the eligible land area of 50 hectares on the basis that they're also eligible for BASE by having at least one payment entitlement. So that would be allowable, and you can see the benefit there for the holding.
Thanks, Eddie. If you plan on entering a partnership, can you hold off on entering as a young farmer for the future?
You can hold off entering as a young farmer for the future. At the moment, you have to submit your first application for young farmer supports within 5 years of joining the partnership. So if you join the partnership, like if you joined the partnership 5 years ago, this is your last year that you would be eligible. We have no, we have no idea at this point what supports may be in place for generational renewal for young farmers after 2027. So, we can't say that holding off joining a partnership for 2 or 3 years from now is going to allow you to benefit from X, Y, or Z, because we simply don't know. The only certainty we have is the support schemes that are in place at the moment up to 2027. So if people want to avail of those, then and they meet the eligibility requirements in terms of young farmer, in age, education, commencement date, and so on, they can submit their application and draw down those payments. We can't say beyond 2027 what may or may not be available.
Thanks again, Eddie. Next question we have in the box: what advisory supports are in place for young farmers to ensure no accidental non-compliance occurs? I suppose we have queries there. You've given the mailbox and the phone number if someone has a question when they're applying. If there is a concern that there potentially might be a non-compliance, if they were to submit an application, that's the route to go to get a query in at this point to seek some clarity.
Yeah, there are also, we have events such as this, and we've had previous webinars. What I mentioned earlier during the presentation is that somewhere around 80% of all applications are submitted by registered agricultural agents, and those agricultural agents receive training every year, and they receive training on a broad range of schemes that the department administer, and that would include CASYF, and it would point out, the pitfalls of the young farmer not actually maintaining financial and managerial control. Agents will be aware of the penalties that are involved, the significant financial penalties. So, there's quite a deal of education and information that goes out through that particular source, through all the false registered agents that the department would engage with, as I say, as well as events like this. And as you mentioned, we have those contact details available there on our side, and Ray gave an email address there as well, where people can come and ask questions, and we'll be only too glad to provide any information that we can.
Thanks, Eddie. One for Ray here. In relation to the inspection phase, if an applicant has started in a joint herd number and is intending on going into a registered farm partnership, are there any implications here?
I might just pass that one back to Eddie there. He might have a better understanding of that one.
Sorry, can you just give that question again there, James? My apologies.
Yeah. So it was phrased that in relation to the inspection phase, if an applicant has started in a joint herd number and is intending on going into a registered farm partnership, are there any implications?
No implications. If you're in a joint herd at the moment and you're availing of the of CISYF, you've had to meet the same requirements in terms of demonstrating control within that entity that you would have to demonstrate under a partnership. So if you're in a joint herd, it's one of the group entities. So you've joint herd, you've partnership, you've company. So you're in that joint herd alongside somebody else who is not necessarily a young farmer, and you have to demonstrate that you have control within that entity. in terms of having your name and the herd number, having your name in the bank account, completing the declaration, and then providing the supporting documents to show that your name is on the paperwork around the day-to-day transactions within the holding. The same will apply in a partnership, in that you are now moving into just a different entity, but it's a different group entity. And you still have to, within that entity, demonstrate the same level of financial and managerial control as you had under the joint herd number. So there shouldn't really be any implications there. And when it comes to inspections, Ray's colleagues out in the field will be looking at the same level of control within the group that they, in a partnership, as they would have been looking for within the joint herd.
Thanks, Eddie. I have a question for you, Eddie, there in relation to the qualifications. So the person asking the question has a qualification at level 7 in forestry, which is on the list of approved qualifications. Will that make me an eligible candidate under the Young Farmer Scheme?
Yeah, there's an appendix to the terms and conditions, and it sets out as a comprehensive list of eligible courses in there. If that course is listed in the appendix, then you meet the educational requirements. So if you meet the other requirements in terms of age and commencement date and so on, then that means that you're meeting those eligibility requirements. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Eddie. Does the declaration need to be completed and signed by a solicitor annually?
No, it only needs to be completed at the initial application stage, or if you change entity. That's the thing. So if you've completed it, let's say if you've completed it as in a joint herd and you move into a company, for example, the company secretary has to complete it at that stage. But that's set out in the terms and conditions, and we ask people to contact us in that situation where they're changing that type of entity, and then we'll talk them through whatever the requirements are. But in generally speaking, 99% of applications, you just have to submit that declaration as a supporting document with your first application in the first year of application. Yeah.
Thanks, Eddie. Final question here, which is addressed to both presenters. A lot of talk about the checks and inspections. Will this turn off a lot of genuine cases?
I would imagine that it'll actually encourage genuine cases because they've nothing to fear. Because the hope is that it will turn off those who are not genuine cases, those who have been, like the funding for the CASYF is taken from the direct payment ceiling. So, it's a contribution that is made from all farmers and the direct payments that all farmers to benefit from. So it should be in everybody's interest to ensure that this money is going to genuine young farmers. And someone who doesn't meet the eligibility requirements, someone who isn't a genuine young farmer, is actually drawing down money that would otherwise be made available to genuine cases. So I think that's the way I'd prefer to focus on it, is that it will encourage genuine cases and hopefully discourage those who are maybe chancing their arm.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Eddie. Okay, I'd just like to thank both presenters again tonight for their time, and thank you all for joining us here this evening. I hope you found it all very useful. This session will be made available online as well if you wish to view back. And as both presenters outlined in their presentations, there are email mailboxes there. If you have any further queries, please send them in and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So thanks again, everyone, and have a good night.